you a couple of announcements so you know where things are in our facility. If you go out this hallway and turn to your left, the bathroom will be right there should you need to use the bathroom at any point during the day. Lunch will be served at noon. We are asking those who have registered and paid to go through the line first. And then if you are on the waiting list, we should have extras. And so then you can pay and go through the line as well. We will need just a second at lunchtime to bring all the stuff out of the kitchen, but it's already in there. So if you'll just give us about 5 minutes in between things, we will get it all situated and set and ready for lunch. It is my honor this morning to introduce to you Bishop Ken Carter. He is a beloved past pastor of this congregation, served here in the 80s, and that is when Oak Ridge fell in love with him. He went on to serve at Church Street and then was elected bishop and served in both Tennessee Conference as well as Mississippi. He went on to be a professor at Duke Divinity School, where I got to kind of learn from his legacy and the programs that he left behind, and I greatly appreciated that. And now is well known for many of his writings, as well as his blog, Shifting Margins. And so we are just overjoyed that you have come to be with us today. And so would you join me in welcoming Bishop Ken Carter?
Good morning. Good morning. Gosh, you haven't changed a bit. I know that I am overdressed. I should have remembered. But as I quoted to one of my colleagues earlier, when Bill Kilday irreverently said, "You clean up pretty good." What Kern Usler said to me, Bishop Usler, who was our bishop, he was the bishop who helped to bring the bishops here to Oak Ridge when I was the pastor. He was dressed in this very loud outfit one day. I think he had a yellow sport coat, green slacks, a pink shirt, and a coordinating tie. You can imagine that. And I said, "Bishop Usler, you sure look sharp." And his response was, "When the flesh fails, adorn it." So since my flesh has failed, I am adorning it as much as I can. Well, I could spend all day just remembering here, but I've been instructed that my part in the homecoming is to deal with the present, not the past or the future. But I want us to focus, and I appreciate the interest and the commitment that this congregation has to being relevant to the situations and the contexts in its own time. We confronted many of those when we were here. For example, the bishops when they came here to discuss the nuclear letter that they were doing, and then they came back. Some of them came back a couple of years later and the discussion of genetics and genetic science. And that's been one of the great programs or ministries that this church has provided over the years, the intersection of science and religion. And I want to affirm how much you as a congregation shaped my own life and ministry. We often talk about how much pastors shape congregations. And having served for 12 years as an active bishop, I knew from my own personal experience this was true, but how valid it is a principle that congregations shape pastors at least as much as pastors shape congregations. And when I was introduced by the district superintendent to the Staff Parish Relations Committee here in 1983, when I had been assigned here from Concord after spending 10 years there, I said to the Staff Parish Relations Committee, "I'm a little bit intimidated because I have no background in science. I barely got through general biology. And I came through the humanities, not the sciences. And here I am being the pastor among all of you scientists. And the beloved Don Trotter, the great saint that he was. Don was chair of the staff parish, and he said to me, "Ken, we don't need any more scientists and engineers. We need a pastor. And if you will take your role as a pastor, and our theologian, he used that word, and you take it as serious as we take our science, we'll be just fine. You taught me several things, and you also, I wish I could go back now and have science. I have then worked, they appointed me, they thought surely since I'm in Oak Ridge, I know something about science. So the General Church appointed me as the chair of the task force on genetic engineering and theology. Well, Bob Fujimura became a member of that task force. I hear from Bob occasionally. Many of you remember him. He's out in Seattle now. His wife died recently. Well, so I could go on, but I won't do that. I'm not here to talk about my past here. But thank you for your contribution to my life and to my ministry. And thank you for your concern for Linda. Many of you have asked about her. Linda is in the severe stage of her frontal temporal dementia. She is at home receiving 24/7 care along with me. She is under hospice care. She was diagnosed in 2009. She is, the prayer we have prayed over the years is that Linda will be at peace. And she is primarily at peace. Sleeps maybe 18, 20 hours out of the day. But there are those moments of joy, connection, and even deep alertness. She knows with her heart who I am, even when her mind has forgotten. One of my first sermons here, it was early in the summer. I don't know why I chose this topic as my sermon, but it was growing old. I was only 43. But there had been an incident that had occurred over in Concord, down at the traffic light where the elementary school is on the left. Well, it depends on which way you're going on King's Pike. But I'd stopped at that traffic light behind an elderly man, and he was sitting rigidly at the steering wheel, holding on tightly, slumped down in his chair. Behind me was a young man who was just the opposite, moving, obviously listening to music. In fact, our windows were down and I could hear his boom box. And he was moving with the music, no, not staying still at all. And I'm in the middle, which was chronologically, that's where I was. Before me was the future, behind me was my past, although I wasn't quite that into that kind of music. When the light changed, the old man was slow accelerating. The young man got impatient, and he was moving around, so suddenly he whipped out into the left lane. His window was down, and as he passed the man in front of me, I heard him say, "Get out of the way, old man." I felt a sense of pity for the older man and what it must feel like to be told, "Get out of the way." But now I have more than pity toward that elderly man, because that's me. I'm not quite as old as he was, but I hope to be one day. But that comment by that young man is an expression of our society's attitude toward aging. It may not be quite that severe, because I think we are making some progress, because our population is getting older, and we're beginning to appreciate more fully the values of the elderly. But there still is preference for the young, and therefore a tendency to devalue, even marginalize, and isolate the old. And that is contrary to where society needs to be. We have an ambivalence toward aging. On the one hand, we glorify it. You know, we look at the Golden Girls, remember that? And what was her name, the elderly one that...
Sophia.
What was her name?
Sophia.
Sophia?
Yeah.
You know, the feisty one? And I said, I want to be like that. I like that. She always has a comeback. She always is on top. You know, nobody ever gets her down. I like that. And there is this notion that the older years are the golden years. Well, some of us can say that's true only in that we have more gold in our mouths. Or we buy and believe what the poet Browning said, the last of life for which the first was made. That we're now to enjoy the years for which our past has prepared us. So on the one hand, we look forward to retirement and the absence of the ongoing responsibilities. We look forward to the time that we could travel, have more free time. Of course, I see some of you, most of you, are now in those years. You know that you get busier than ever. It's just in a different kind of busyness. So we look toward the older years. But on the other hand, we feel and dread growing old. Pierre Teilhard-Chardin has said, growing old is like being increasingly penalized for a crime you haven't committed. Billy Graham said, growing old is not for sissies. So we have a kind of a love-hate relationship toward our own aging. On the one hand, we love parts of our lives, but there are other parts that we don't like, that we dread, that we wish we could drop like a shabby old coat at the door and never put it on again. So we have this ambivalence about growing old. Well, we live with a lot of myths, and we need to face those and the realities. We need to recognize that every age has both assets and liabilities. I frankly would not want to be a teenager again. I'd like to have some of their energy, but I don't want that other stuff they're having to deal with. I'm glad my hormones aren't racing like those days. In fact, I hardly remember what that was. Reminds me of a member of Concord. I was visiting him in the hospital. And it was at Fort Sanders. And I noticed he was in a room outside. I don't know, I haven't been to Fort Sanders in many years, but the nursing school was right across the street. Is that still the case? But anyhow, he was in a room to where he could watch the nursing students, almost all of whom were women, walking across the street. And I said to him, I said, well, you've got quite a room here, don't you? You've got a pretty good view. And he responded, I liked his spirit. He knew what I was getting at. He said, yeah, you know, preacher, I still like watching the young women, but for the life of me, I can't remember why. Also reminds me of the man who was 91. He had on the back of his shirt printed this message: I'm 91, not old, sweet 16 with 75 years experience. I like that attitude. I like that attitude. We know that every age has its struggles. Every age has its challenges, as well as its special joys, its special pleasures, its special intensities. It's true of every age. We tend not to see that being true in the later years, and I hope that we can disabuse ourselves of that notion. Well, we do live in an aging society, and I think that's one reason that the attitudes toward aging may be changing. The baby boomers who once decided that aging is not a good thing, now that they're becoming aging, are trying to find some good in it, and realizing that George Carlin, you'll see a video from him a little later, that George Carlin in some of his monologues on aging has said it's the baby boomers who changed our language. They are pre-elderly. He said it won't be long till they'll be pre-dead. Where we're living in an older population, persons 65 and older numbered in 2014 46.2 million people. They represented 14.5% of the U.S. population. Look how that's changing. The number of Americans ages 65 and older is projected to more than double, from 46 million today to over 98 million in 2016. Now, we won't be around, well, some of us at least, won't be around when that happens. But the 65 and older age group share of the population will rise to nearly 24% from its present 15%. Do you realize the implications of that? The implications financially. Fewer working to support. That's one of the reasons that Social Security, Medicare, and those have a struggle, because there will be fewer supporting more and more of the elderly. 19%, whereas 14% of the population in the U.S. is 65 or older. 19% of the population of Oak Ridge are seniors, according to the government census that I checked on. And it has one of the highest percentages of any city in the state of Tennessee, if not the highest. I think Oak Ridge and Morristown are the two that are at the top. 32% of the population of Oak Ridge, of those seniors, are living alone. How many of you who are over 65 live alone? See, that's getting. Now, did you say you might as well live alone? Is that what you said? What do you think the median age of Oak Ridge members is? Have any idea? I don't know. Pardon? I would be curious about that, because I suspect that the median age of the members of Oak Ridge is probably more than, it's higher because of the percentage here, it's higher than the median age. Certainly it's higher than 37.6. That's the median age of the population in the U.S. But the average, or the median, not average, but the median age of United Methodist members is 57. You see the problem that the United Methodist Church has in not growing? If our median age is 57, we don't have a lot of childbearing folks. And that's the best way to grow a church. Have kids. Any of you ready? God did it with Sarah and Abraham. So when our church bureaucrats, like bishops, push, let's get more young people in our churches, I want to say, what are you going to do about letting older people have children? That's the best way to do it. That's the way we've done it in the past. Because our median age in the 50s was younger than the general population. We were having lots of kids. And that's when we grew. Now we're getting older. We have to find other ways of growing, both numerically, but more importantly, in depth. Well, we also age in a cultural context. Cultures differ in how they view aging, although some of the authorities in aging now say that cultures that once venerated the elderly, such as the Asian cultures, and African cultures, have begun to adopt Western attitudes toward aging. And therefore, we're influencing, through the media, influencing an image of aging that is being exported into societies that once venerated. Now, they still do more than we, but there's that edge, which means we need to change our attitude so we don't lead them down that path too. We live in a society, as you know, that emphasizes youthfulness. Old is unattractive, even ugly. At least the commercials seem to indicate that. And all the reverse, or the aging reverse products out there that make us, at least temporarily, either look younger or cover it up. We do that because youthfulness is valued ahead of older. When I was here, I didn't show like this on top. Now, I'd already begun to comb it over, because I didn't like the idea of getting bald. But I couldn't stop it. I didn't have all of that. Grandson, I have 5 grandchildren. The last one to come along is a boy. 4 girls and 1 boy. One of my grandchildren climbed up on my lap, did this. Now I'm afraid to go out around Thanksgiving. You know, I've learned you might as well give it up. Gravity is going to win. Everything just kind of drops. And you can't do much. You might prop it up, cover it up, but it's inevitable. And our society seems to indicate that's bad. We also value productivity. So we value youthful energy, looks. We value the ability to produce. My dad, and I quote, my dad, who died when he was 84, my dad was a laborer all his life. He worked at the textile mill and on the farm. But when he could no longer do physical work, he felt his life was over. And he used to say, my dad had a 6th grade education. My dad used to say, I ain't worth nothing. You might as well take me out shooting. Now we would laugh. Oh, Dad. But it exposed the deep hurt and sense of worthlessness. As a result, I can't produce anymore. He did learn to crochet. And we have all of these things he crocheted for us. He could produce, but a different kind. It wasn't physical muscle work. We value autonomy and self-reliance, assuming, and this is especially true in the American individualistic world, where I am an island to myself and I must take care of myself. That's all a myth. An isolated individual, a self-made person, is an illusion. We don't come into the world on our own choices, our own initiative. And we don't leave the world either. We come into the world interdependent. If you want to put it that way, we come into the world a burden. And the burden only intensifies. But do you remember, mothers, when you cradled that little burden that you gave birth to? Gosh, this is a burden. No, it was a joy. Sure, there were days it felt burdensome, but the person is not a burden. The chores become toilsome. The people are burdens. Tasks are burdensome. But there's a difference. To never communicate that you are a burden. Linda is now totally dependent on me and caregivers. She cannot feed herself. She cannot walk. She cannot control her bodily functions. But she is not a burden to me. She is a joy to me. I love her now as she is, not just as she was. Yes, I wish she didn't have the disease. I wish I didn't have some things I had. But she's not a burden because I love her. That's in the next section too. We've got this, another reality is the isolation of generations. I live in a retirement community. I moved in there because of its continuous care availability, knowing that we were going to need it, particularly for learning. But I have my grandchildren 2 minutes away. I'm still active. I get out. I go to church and Sunday school. I interact across generations. How many in the nursing homes and institutions never see children, never see a young person? a youth, never see a young adult, or seldom. We segregate. Now we have to do some of that, but we also have to find ways of breaking down that isolation. And the community that has the best opportunity to do that is the church. We are about breaking down barriers and isolation. We are about shifting the margins. The title of my blog, one reason for it. We shift the margins to where all the margins are included at the center. And that means the open. We do live in a death-denying culture. The myth of immortality. That is that we're going to live forever. Well, I trust God to do whatever, life after death. But boy, I don't have any control over it. I have to trust God with it. And I'm not going to live this life forever. But there's some major challenges. What time are we supposed to quit this session? Whenever I get done, thank you. Reminds me of when I was preaching down in Martin, Tennessee, Bishop. First Church Martin. I always told the pastors of congregations when the bishop comes, and by the way, I'm Ken. My first name isn't Bishop. I don't even do that anymore. That isn't even my job anymore. But I always told the pastor, now, don't take the children out. I'll try to make the sermon friendly with the children. I tried to involve the children. But I made a mistake on this Sunday. I said to the kids, they were seated down, there was a whole row of kids, I think they had Sunday school class. And I said, kids, you help me. I want you to help me every time. Bad children. When I go too long, just tell them, hold up your hand. Why did I do that? Well, about 2 minutes, get to the turn. The boy raised his hand. I said, oh, come on, give me a little more time. Stay with me, kids. Give me about 15 minutes. Would you do that? Well, they didn't. About 3 minutes later, up went the hand again. Come on, I still got more to say. So they quieted down. I went on another 3 minutes. Finally, this little kid went. I wanted to say, send that kid out. I didn't need him. Now, where was I? But we have major challenges. I don't have to tell you about these challenges. There are physical and cognitive growing limitations. We physically can't do what we once did. Neither can we do cognitively what we once did. We reach a plateau in our thinking even, our ability to retain, our ability of the brain, its ability to retain, to organize, to sequence. And we're all relatively cognitively impaired, right? It's on a continuum. But we also become increasingly body conscious. Or am I just the only one does that? I mean, I'm aware. I'm more aware of this. I mean, I've stopped looking to see if it's gotten worse. I can't get it. In the barber shop, said, I had my jacket on like this. And I said to the barber, I guess you can cut my hair with my jacket on, can't you? He said, I can cut your hair with your hat on. But we become increasingly aware of our frailties, our losses. It's interesting, adolescents become body conscious of what's developing in their bodies. We become body conscious of what we're losing in our body. But we're both body conscious. We have increasing medical issues and medical costs. And I wouldn't make light of that. I have 24/7 care for living. That is enormously expensive. Financial security becomes a different matter. One of the favorite conversations around Lowman, with Heritage at Lowman, where I live, we have Romeo breakfast once a month. You know what Romeo breakfasts are? Retired old men beating out, eating out. Retired old men eating out. We're Romeos. One of the favorite conversations around the table every first Thursday morning. Well, what medicines are you taking? I went to the doctor this week. I went to the doctor. I developed this other ailment. And one man sitting at the table, he's a new admission. He came from Greenville, Tennessee. His name is Cliff. He drove himself from Greenville over to the Heritage at Lowman in near Columbia and admitted himself to that retirement community of assisted living. 102 years old. Cliff was sitting at the table. He hadn't said a word about his medicine. So one of the members said, Cliff, what medicine do you take? I don't take any. Well, how do you get by without taking any medicine? I don't go to doctors. Well, about 6 months later, Cliff fell and fractured his hip. We thought that would be at 102, that would be the end of Cliff. Cliff spent maybe 6 weeks in rehab, and he's back now, and he's 105. Every day he's in the library, reading. He stays engaged. But the contrast, the rest of us very aware, because we spend a lot of time with our illnesses, our physical and mental losses. Well, the frail elderly confront special challenges. One of the best books on aging that I have found is this book by an ethicist by the name of Fritz Delaney. It's called Loving Later Life, an Ethics of Aging. It's very well recommended and commended by scholars like Sarah knows about, Stanley Hauerwas, Keith Metter, and others. But he contends that when we usually think of loving the elderly, we think of loving the active elderly and don't think of the frail elderly. But that all of us, if we live long enough, will become frail. And the challenge is to love ourselves in our frailty. What does it mean to love life when my physical and cognitive abilities have diminished and perhaps disappear. How do I love my life when I become totally dependent? How do I love my frailty? Or how do I love myself in the midst of my frailty? And Delane says that if we can't come to love ourselves in the midst of our frailty, we will be unable to love our neighbor who is frail. Does that make sense? So he pushes that we've got to learn to love our lives at every level. So hence the ethics of love. Love is the key, he says. That's in the next section on what the theology offers those of us who are growing old. The loss of relationships and isolation, we've talked about that, and that's pretty self-evident. The number of elderly who live alone, who are isolated. The loss of autonomy and the fear of being a burden. Talked about that. So we need an alternative or a supplemental lens through which to view aging. I think we need a theological lens. We need a God's-eye view of what it means to grow old, to provide a broader, more holistic view of life than simply viewing life as a continuous, persistent, relentless series of losses. How can life be a relentless series of gains, of growth in love? Because it is love that lasts. So we want to talk about that in the next session, to provide that broader view and to provide resources for aging with grace as God's gives. George Carlin, if you know George Carlin. You know, some of his videos I could not show in this one. So I had to do some screening. And I hope the one that is on the screen here in a few minutes. But he also, I think, has a way of, with humor, but with insight, say something about what it is to grow old. So let's close this segment right now watching this short video of George Carlin.